Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel. And this is part of the good stuff. This is the education series. And I am super happy to have Brent Studer with us today. Hey, Brent.
Hi, Frank. How are you today?
I am doing well on this June 22nd of 2022. So it's one day after solstice.
Happy summer.
So summer is official in the Northern Hemisphere. Where are you located at, Brent?
I'm located in Iowa City, Iowa, where the University of Iowa is located.
And so Iowa City in mid-June is probably up in the hundreds with a little bit of humidity.
A little bit toasty. We had a couple days of mid-90s for the temperatures and excess of 100 degrees for the heat index, and been pretty humid most of those days.
Yes, yes. So I'm in Phoenix, and this is actually the wet season in Phoenix. This is when the humidity goes up. So we got our monsoons rolling, going through. So this is when the lightning happens in Phoenix. So our humidity is up as well. So it's not that traditional dry desert heat, as opposed to the humid heat of the Midwest and the Gulf. So very cool. Brent, where do you teach at?
I teach at Kirkwood Community College. They are based in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is about 30 minutes north of north of Iowa City. So there's a corridor that kind of connects Iowa City and Cedar Rapids together. And so the college is based in Cedar Rapids, but they do have a campus down here in Iowa City, which is where I've taught for many years. And they serve about a 9 or 10 county area around Eastern Iowa location, East Central Iowa. And a couple times I've actually taught on one of the older systems, teaching students in those regional centers in the 10 county area surrounding Cedar Rapids, Iowa City.
So you get these 10 counties. So roughly how many students do you get per course, and then how many courses do you do in a given semester, let's say?
In a given semester, it has varied a little bit with the enrollment fluctuating during the pandemic. So there have been some changes. Typically, it's two courses a semester I teach, and one of them would be a traditional face-to-face class. We're now back in face-to-face mode instead of hybrid. So one of those is a face-to-face class, and that's one that I've really taught for a little bit over 30 years now, basically since graduating and getting out of grad school. So I've been teaching face-to-face for 30 years.
Cool.
So that's I can't believe it's been that long. That's been a kind of a long stretch.
Time flies.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like I'm old enough to have been teaching that many years. And then for about 5 years or so, I taught over what is called the Kirkwood television system, which is the live television system to the students in the Penn County area. And so I don't do that anymore. Classroom then, and students were in other classrooms in these remote locations, and it could be maybe 100 students in all of those remote locations. So it was a very large class with students having to go to a central location. The last couple of years, I've started teaching asynchronous online course in addition to my face-to-face class.
Okay. Roughly, given all those counties, roughly how many students do you get in a typical in-person offering?
In the in-person offering, we do limit it, of course, to the size of the classrooms. So it tends to be anywhere from 25 to maybe 35. The classrooms are probably 30 to 40 for this seating capacity. So that's what I tend to get in the face-to-face classes, is somewhere around 25 students, maybe up to 30, depending on the classroom.
Okay. And when you do the regional television one, is that pre-recorded, or is that you actually standing in front of a television camera live and delivering?
It was standing in front of a television camera and delivering. So that's why we've sort of moved past that model, but that was the way we did it. Yeah, there was a television camera, so I kind of felt like a news anchor sometimes, giving the class presentation, interacting with students in the classroom, and those that were answering questions over the over the network, and then watching the light flash to know that I had only 2 minutes left before the camera would shut off.
Wow. Ooh. Makes one stay on topic with given that.
I know, that was always really a challenge, because once that light flashed, I knew I had 2 minutes to wrap things up.
Wrap it
And
up.
students didn't have time to ask questions after class either, because it was over.
Yeah.
So
what's the title of the courses that you teach?
Sure. The course is just Introduction to Astronomy. That's the standard title. And we still teach the course in the format it was, when I was in college, and probably when you're in college, which is a 1-semester survey of astronomy. Well, when I was in college, they called it modern astronomy or something like that. So it's trying to cover everything in the universe in 16 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, let's see. On mine at Arizona State University, we split it up into 2. So we have Introduction to Solar Systems. So that also includes exosolar and the sun and that. And then we have a second one, which is Introduction to Stars and Cosmology. So we sort of split it along those lines. But I've certainly taught them as you have, where you get the whole universe in 16 weeks.
Yeah, which is the real challenge, because I think the year I started teaching was the year Hubble was launched, and so there's been such an explosion of information and discovery since then that it's really hard to compress everything into 1 semester and then decide what you're going to have to cut out, because you can't cover everything.
Can't cover everything.
Right.
Very cool. So I'm curious, when you open your courses, so here you are in the first couple of sessions, what is it that you present to students? How do you hook them in that opening couple sessions?
Sure. Good question. One of the things I like to do after the introductions and learning a little bit about the students, since it's a course that satisfies the general education requirements, I know I've got students with all levels of comfort and familiarity with math and science, all majors in the course. So we do that typical introduction and finding out what their career aspirations are, why they were taking the course, what questions they want answered before the semester's over.
Ooh,
and
that's a good one.
Yeah, so I always ask
Oops, a little bandwidth issue here.
questions, and if they have more, that's great. Yeah, doing okay now? Okay.
Yeah, you're doing okay now.
So, okay, great. Yeah, I know that's always sometimes one of the issues with the Wi-Fi. So I always ask them to come up with 2 questions. If they can, if they have more, that's great. But try to come up with 2 questions that tell me what topics or things they would like to learn more about by the end of the semester. So we do that. And then after we've done that little introduction and gone through some of the logistics of the course, I then introduce an activity, and I wish I remembered where I first saw it. Maybe it was through the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, or as one of their AstroBeat newsletters. I just don't remember, but it is essentially the 40-inch solar system. And so what I do is I take a strip of cash register tape, cut to 40 inches, and give it to the students and let them work in pairs or individually, and tell them to draw a little sun at one end, draw Pluto at the other end.
Okay.
And now we fill in the rest of the major planets. And so I ask them to, what are the planets in order? And then I also throw in a series because we've got that dwarf planet in the asteroid belt. So I give them 5 or 10 minutes to try to figure out what they think the spacing is of the major planets and the asteroid belt.
Very cool. That's great.
Yeah, and I really emphasize to them that I don't expect you to get the right answer, because one thing I'm really trying to teach them is you're expected to be wrong on a lot of these things and to be surprised, and you won't often know the answer before you investigate a problem. So I don't expect you to get this right. I don't want you to use your phones or open the book or anything. I want you to guess and try to figure out what you think the answer is by what you know right now.
Very good. Do you put a point value on those when you do that activity, or is it open-ended?
This one I generally, this is kind of an open-ended thing, but throughout the semester I will do what I sometimes will call in-class quizzes, for lack of a better term. But I tell the students they're not quizzes. It's not a pop quiz, but there's some topic that we will discuss this hour of class. And at the end of that hour, I will ask you to take out a sheet of paper and answer a question based on something we've covered that particular hour. And then they'll give that as a way of checking attendance and giving a few participation points for class.
Yeah, good. During the 16 weeks, do you have them do any observational activities, get outside and look at the moon, or things along those lines? Or
yeah,
like a telescope facility there at Kirkwood that you roll out some 10-inch celestrons or something like that?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have our own telescope, so that does make observing a little bit of a challenge. And where the campus I teach the face-to-face classes are located, it's kind of right in the city limits, and so we're really limited on what we can see there. With my asynchronous online section, then I don't know where the students are and what they're, they don't have a telescope probably, or binoculars. But we do have an amateur astronomy club that is nearby that has partnered with the University of Iowa. They have several of the University of Iowa's older retired telescopes, and they have a really, really nice facility. And so I will offer students the opportunity to go up there. Like most astronomy clubs, they have monthly presentations to the public with observing opportunities if the weather permits afterwards. And so I do that, but mostly as extra credit or additional credit, because it's hard to require students to drive out of town. Not all of them have transportation, different work schedules and so forth. So I do make those opportunities available for them. But anytime there's something visible in the sky, like the alignment of the visible planets from antiquity this week, I would ask them to go out and look. Exactly. Timing isn't always great. Going out at 5 o'clock in the morning isn't perfect. But I will often ask them to do those kind of activities. Again, knowing their work schedules and family responsibilities and transportation can be an issue, I always try to find an alternate activity too for those that may not be able to make arrangements to see some of these things. But those kind of conjunctions or alignments, I make them aware of. I used to have them track the moon, which was something I did in college, but it's so easy today with a program like Stellarium or something else to just, to get the information without having to make the observations. Yep, we did the triangulation with the string and everything and plotted on an SC1 chart. So I may not have them track the moon anymore, but I may ask them to go out and observe the moon at a particular time and record the time and the date and its orientation to the horizon, so they can learn how the moon is oriented to the sun in the different phases and the time that it's visible.
Cool. So one of the things I do for in my courses for on that observational size is I have them make a pinhole camera.
Oh, nice.
And then we do things like measure the diameter of the sun, measure the diameter of the moon. And so, yeah, they may not have big fancy telescopes, but I try and do as much as I can with simple like a pinhole. It's amazing sometimes how much energy and effort they put into those, considering the point value.
Right.
It's not that great, but boy, they get into it, and someone built some pretty impressive pinhole cameras to go with. So just an idea, just throwing that out there. If one doesn't have telescopes, maybe consider doing some pinhole stuff.
Yeah, that's excellent. And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to in discussions like this, and hearing from other educators, is getting some of those ideas.
Learning ideas,
yeah. Why didn't I think of that? Excellent.
Everybody, very cool. So as you go through the course and you come, do you have them do like a final project at the end on either something specific or something that they're free to do whatever they want? Or
Sure. I used to ask students to write a term paper on some aspect of astronomy, but I know that's not everyone's forte, and writing can be a real challenge, especially writing for a topic they didn't really do the original research on.
Right.
So what I've decided to do, rather than having them write a research or a term paper, is we do a series of lab-based activities for the class. Mine is not just a lecture course. We do a few lab-based activities. So I may ask them to write 1 or 2 lab reports. So they learn how to write a lab report based on, the style that we probably learned in our undergraduate astronomy labs.
Yeah.
And in place of the term paper, then I have started asking students to construct an academic poster on some topic of astronomy that is of interest to them.
Okay.
Yeah, and that also gives the students a chance to exercise their creative muscles. And so they are free to choose the topic. I usually ask that they just run it past me so I can help focus the topic. Maybe it's too broad, maybe it's too narrow. I can point them to resources. I also give them a list of suggested topics to get their, to sort of get the juices flowing and get them thinking about different topics. So they do that, and then I believe it is Penn State has a really nice section on academic posters, and so I showed them the Penn State website, which actually has the design aspects of a poster, which is really nice. And so you see this poster laid out. They talk about white space. They talk about capitalization versus lowercase, how to choose colors to coordinate with the images that go in your poster. So I do that aspect, and I think they really enjoy that because they get to research a topic. It doesn't seem as daunting as a paper,
right?
And they get to be a little creative.
That's cool. I'll find that, and we'll put a link to the Penn State poster guidance in the description below the video. So check that out.
Yeah, and I can send you the link if you have trouble finding it, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just a Penn State.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I kind of do something similar. I do have them do a final project, but I open it up and let them do things like videos, if they want to do a video. Something more than a 30-second TikTok video, but some aspect where they might be doing. I know a number, at least of the particular students I have, there are ones who like to draw, there are ones who like to paint, there's ones who like to do hand activities. So I really cut them loose on their creative juices, whatever the medium might be. Sometimes it's poster, sometimes it's paper, sometimes it's a sculpture, and then record that. So yeah, I do the same thing. Encourage them to engage what it is they like and make it touch the learning objectives of the course.
Yeah, those are great ideas, because one of the things I've wanted to do is open it up a little bit more. I've kind of done some of the things the same way I've done them over the years, and didn't make significant changes when I went from face-to-face to teaching an asynchronous online section. But students do sometimes record themselves as they're presenting their posters. So having these other aspects of video recordings or sculptures that they could present using the course management system, that those things are all great ideas. Even in the face-to-face class, that'd be great.
Yeah, no. I want to loop back on something you mentioned. The students are busy, sometimes they got jobs. And so I'm curious, sort of, what is the average demographic of your courses? Are these, traditional 18, 20-year-olds, or are these more 35-year-olds?
Yeah, I think it varies a little bit between the face-to-face class and the asynchronous online class. My face-to-face class, I would say probably the majority of students are in the 18 to 24-ish, 25 range. Some of them are straight out of high school. Some are even still in
high school.
And so there are the traditional college students, although some may be going back to school after, not going to school right out of high school. So they're starting college. But I do get a number of non-traditional students that are changing careers, getting a degree after having worked for many years. I've even had retirees or students. I had a retired doctor from the University Hospitals and Clinics take my course one time. I've had an avionics technician take my class. His job was to fly around the world and install weather radars in aircraft. And he had to go to wherever the plane was being serviced. He said, so I need something to do. I take college classes, so I have something to do when I'm on a plane for 10 hours. So, but nice. Yeah, and I get a lot of single parents and other students like that as well.
Lifelong learners.
Yep, quite a few of those. And I think it probably skews a little bit more towards the non-traditional age students in the online course.
Cool. Then you mentioned your asynchronous course. So are those recorded? And so they are asynchronous, or you do it live once, record it, and then anybody can watch the current recording?
Yeah, it's mostly learning on their own. I don't record the entire presentation or an entire course lecture. I will record little bits and pieces to give them some help as they go along the course. But there is no recording of an entire class section that they have to sit down and watch for 50 minutes or whatever a regular class period is.
Okay. And this is still within the 15 weeks. So maybe study at your own pace. Some will go slower, some will go faster, but you still have to finish the block within 16 weeks, let's say.
Exactly. So it's the same length of the semester.
Okay.
Every instructor does it a little bit differently. I do put together a calendar with deadlines in that. I don't want them to get so far behind that they're scrambling in the last 3 weeks to do all the coursework. So I do put deadlines in there, but I am flexible with the actual due dates based on their specific situation.
Sure. Yep.
And usually there's a window. Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say, usually there's a window, say for like the exams after the first unit, which is the fundamentals of astronomy, history of astronomy, the nature of light and gravity and so forth. And for example, after the first unit and the second unit, I may give them an entire week to take the exam. So that'll give them a chance to kind of catch up on that material.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I give a week for the exam. Whenever you want to take it is fine. That gets away from, people's, whatever their schedules might be. So sometime you can work it in, whether it's early morning, late at night, whatever works for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I tend to do the same thing on wide time avenues for exams.
I know some students they're free during the week, and then their weekends are when they do the work, and some it's just the opposite situation. So flexibility is really key.
Ooh, Sky and Telescope. Do you make much use of the Sky and Telescope articles or materials in your course, or is that something in the future, or just curious how you might use that resource?
Yeah, I do. I'm really glad that Sky and Telescope is made available to the instructors and to the students, and I appreciate the condensed version, which give the students some of the news highlights and the sky charts and everything like that. So I will put that in the course management system every month, so they can see that there's some new. I also look at the full issue. Since I get both the electronic and the paper edition, I look at that. And then if there's an article that I think is really interesting or relevant to the discussion we're having that week, or maybe something that might be relevant to their poster project or their end of this, end of the semester project, I will put those articles up there as well and say, hey, here's a resource if you are interested in knowing about galaxies, or if you're interested about studying how Henrietta Leavitt discovered the relationship with Cepheid variables. Here's an article about her, and keep that in mind.
Cool. Yeah, and for those who don't know, Sky and Telescope is over the last, I guess, year, has been making a foray into getting some of their material, whether it's evergreen material or whether it's more topical material, into the classroom. And so there are a number of S&T Sky and Telescope ambassadors or educators like you and me, who are experimenting with putting this in the course live. So if you're interested in getting some of this S&T material, reach out, get in touch, and we will put you in touch with all this and start getting you some Sky and Telescope ammunition to put in your courses. So yeah, so what I've done with the Sky and Telescope, so I've done it in the last 2 runs of the course now. I will just put up, because the course I'm teaching is Intro to Solar Systems, I will specifically pick sort of solar system articles and put them up. And I do get students to comment on occasion, not as often as I would like. So I think what I'm going to do in this next upcoming semester in fall is I'm going to put some small point value on it. 2 to 5 points, give me your feedback, or just talk about it, and see if that, oftentimes just a little bit of a carrot is enough to break the dam and let it go down. So, but so far, I think using that sky and telescope material in the classroom has been a net positive for the course. They hear different people, which is always a good thing. Variety is the spice of life. And it exposes them to the whole amateur professional astronomy activities and what people do and how they talk. And it's also good for getting telescopes. You always get, how do I get a telescope? And there's always good articles for that. So yeah, we'll put a link in for the sky and telescope stuff down below too, if you're interested in reaching out.
I think I heard you one other time mention assigning small point values to some of the
Mm.
articles or readings there, and I think that's a great idea. One thing that I haven't quite figured out how to manage is assigning small point values to discussions, particularly in the online asynchronous course. And so that might be one way to help me focus that. And otherwise, I'm trying to think of discussion topics, and students don't always participate in the discussions. They lurk sometimes, but having those tied to maybe reading of a small news article from Sky and Telescope and putting the points values to that would certainly be the nice little carrot to help them participate in the discussion more frequently.
What is the LMS that you use?
We use Desire to Learn is the one. Yep, and so it's been modified a little bit for Kirkwood, but yeah, it's D2L is what we use.
Okay, we use Canvas.
Okay,
where we're at, and the other technology I use for this kind of stuff when I want them to do a project and have discussion and get point values for it is we use Yellow Dig, which is kind of a discussion board. But the advantage of it is that you can give a certain number of points for a post, and then a certain number of points for replying to somebody else's post. Okay. And they're small point values, but it often generates much more discussion. And then those point values automatically get from Yellow Dig, they get auto loaded up to the LMS, in this case, Canvas or something like that. So, and students seem to really like Yellow Dig, which is great. Okay, fantastic. So just throwing it out there that there are some tools out there if you do want to give point values for discussion and not have to necessarily hand grade every single response or post and who did what. There are some tools out there that can help encourage that discussion and take the auto grade the discussion, so to speak. So as long as the post is 30 words, they get 7 points and away they go.
That's interesting. I hadn't actually heard of that tool in the discussions I've had with the instructional designer, so I'll check that out. That sounds really. And
there are other ones. I'm not getting paid from Yellow Dig or something.
Sure.
It's just the one I use.
Right. Yeah, they may have other ones that they've heard about, and I just haven't talked to them about that aspect of the course management system, but I'll definitely look into that. Or
maybe there's some built-in capability in the LMS you're using to do that, to set up a special discussion where they get points for posting and replying.
Right. I know there are in some of the books when they add modules. I know certain publishers, they have their own add-on tool that has some of those features built into it, but then they change from textbook publisher to textbook publisher.
Okay. How about things like, well, you mentioned one, Stellarium. Do you use things like Starry Night, or most people will have a mobile these days? Do you have them download augmented reality stuff, so point at the sky, have it named stars? Do you use much of that?
I do tend to use the Starry Night a little bit more, simply because it's so easy to install with all the different platforms. If students want to use those other ones, I encourage that, and I work through one of the discussions in class and give them a list of different ones that they can choose between. They sometimes will have a better idea whether they're using an Android or an iPhone. They'll be able to tell me, hey, it's cost something on this, in this store, but it's free on the other store. So they can kind of help me figure that out too. But for the most part, I've used Stellarium, partly just because it is free, and I think I used to use Starry Night myself, but I found that Stellarium does just as good a job on almost everything that I need for the class. So.
Right. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I will use it, Stellarium or otherwise. On occasion, but I haven't really, I guess, fully engaged it all the way through, like, say, a whole semester. So it's not like I have a weekly stellarium assignment or something like that, or 3 or 4 or something like that. So that's something I would like to do in the future, is see how I can better integrate some of these planetarium programs in the course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't done a good job of that myself. I've tried to put together a few activities. For example, maybe looking at a historical eclipse, so they just change the
Oh, yeah.
location. But I haven't really thought through a lot of other activities that they could actually do using the program. So
Mhm.
on my list of things I should do.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, teaching generally evolves over time, right? You hear something
Exactly.
new. That's part of the purpose of these videos, is just to hear something new, and ooh,
Right.
I might want to try that. So
Yeah.
it's really just an idea thing.
Mhm.
Um, uh, are there other activities or other pedagogies that you might consider using in the future, or that you want to gravitate to, or sort of where do you take your teaching in the future, so to speak?
Sure. Um, yeah, a couple things that I would love to do in the future. One, as you sort of alluded to earlier, is breaking the course up, and that's just something that I haven't done. I
Ah,
know many other colleges have broken it up into stars, galaxies in the universe in one semester, and Earth, planets in the solar system, or something like that in another semester. It's something that I would have to do, and put together the presentation for the college board.
oh yeah,
Part of
there's
the
a
draw.
process.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of
The
processes in there,
process.
and part of the drawback is the time involved. Even though
Huh?
I know how the course should be divided, it's pretty easy to figure out how the course should be divided into two and where the split should be made. But presenting that, and then also our community college system has a synonym number system, which is basically the course number that is then on the transcript. So other
Oh,
colleges know how to assign credit for transfer students.
got it.
And
Mhm.
so the course, if it's broken in two, would need to be assigned new synonym numbers so that the credits would transfer properly to different institutions. So there is a lot of process involved with that, but that's kind of in my mind at some point, or maybe even just going in a different direction, because some students ask, hey, what other course do you teach?
Ooh,
Maybe
yes.
something more interdisciplinary,
Yeah.
and maybe a cosmology course, or a course that ties together literature and science, or art and science,
Uh-huh.
or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Um, so those are a couple things that I've kind of got in the back of my mind of how to maybe make a new course, or change the one that I've got. More immediately, I think, is changing some of the lab activities, because my course is one that does require lab activities
Okay.
rather than just a lecture course. And I've done everything
Okay.
from the old evergreen sky and telescope lab activities from the 70s and 80s, and they're great
They're
activities.
evergreen.
They're evergreen, and I still use some of those activities, but I'm finding ways to make them more modern. So instead of looking at the how far is the galactic center, and using the color magnitude diagrams that are in that handout, maybe using Gaia data, or using some other NASA
Ooh,
data, and
yeah.
having students
Yeah.
construct their own color magnitude diagrams. Um, it's a little hard to scaffold that with students of all different abilities, because some will
Sure.
dive right into that and want to tackle, going into the database and,
Yeah.
pulling down a file and creating their
Plotting.
own color magnitude diagrams. Other students are probably going to struggle just enough to understand the diagrams in the activity itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but finding ways to use resources such as the actual data that is freely available, um, and having students access those rather than just the printed handouts is something I'd like to do.
Yeah.
Um, and I,
That idea.
and I've played around a lot with some of the Hubble images and the Fitz Liberator, and coloring the different uh, layers in the Hubble images, for like the red, green, or the oxygen and sulfur and the
Huh?
hydrogen layers, and creating beautiful color images myself, that's something else that I've had students do sometimes, but now that the FITS Liberator is available online and they don't need a Photoshop and the plugin, it's more accessible to more students.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you were talking there, have you heard of SLU?
Mm-hmm. I have not used it yet and investigated too much.
Right. So that's another one I would like to investigate more, see if I can incorporate that into my courses. I do believe, I'm not sure, but I do believe they have some educator material or access to the telescopes. And so I think it would be really interesting for students to sort of have that thrill of actually pointing a telescope, taking an image, and then doing something with it.
Yeah, I'm looking for more of those resources myself, and so that's one of the things I do is collect bookmarks so I can go back to different sites or hear them mentioned in discussions like this. So being able to make more real observations from these telescopes, I think is definitely something I'm looking to have students do, because currently the only students that have ever done that or anything even close to that are students that might actually ask me, hey, I've taken your class already, I would like to sign up for an honors section, and would you help me do an honors astronomy project? So having access to those telescopes and not having to ask them to go to a local observatory or find some binoculars or borrow a telescope would be a great advantage to them, and it wouldn't limit us to what we can see here in Iowa.
Right, or take a look at it through the eyepiece and remember it is what you saw. You will get the image and you'll have a memory of it.
Yeah, and you don't have to freeze in the Iowa winter either, which is, half of our semester is going to be either very cold in the fall or very cold in the early spring.
Yes, modern observing from the comfort of your home. Yeah. So anyway, I do want to investigate a little bit more about SLU here over the next semester and see how I can get that in there and do that. So that's one direction I also would like to take. Anything else? Any other future directions you might want to head in, or ask me questions? It's all good.
Yeah, and I think those are the directions I'd like to head into. And I think one of the things I've mentioned, the asynchronous online course, and I think we're going to see more and more of that. And one thing I see as an advantage is I know it's not for every student, and not every student has the executive functioning or the time management skills, but it does potentially open up such a wider audience of students who could actually take an astronomy course or go course at times that work for them. So I'm looking forward to exploring more of those opportunities. But for my own personal benefit, I'm really looking forward to these discussions and learning more of how AAS and Sky and Telescope are going to be able to help the community of college instructors. And so I'm really excited about learning about what other instructors are doing and how they're changing their courses as time goes by.
Yeah, and the AAS just recently refurbished, reinvigorated, reconstituted, whatever it may be, the education committee. And so I'm going to be hopefully working with them over the course of the year as we develop this education series and get them in. So and part of this is the goal of this series. Part of it is just to connect educators with each other. So you hear what other people are doing, what works for them, what doesn't, where they may like to go, and just sparking ideas and building community of educators on intro astronomy.
Yeah, that's really exciting because as others who are community college instructors or teach at small colleges know, you often don't have colleagues. For many years, I was the only astronomy instructor at the college. So.
Right. Now it's good to hear some other words. Variety is the spice of life.
Definitely.
So very cool. Brent, I want to thank you so much for sharing your educational activities, what you do and what you want to do and where we're going. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Frank. I enjoyed this.
Thank you. And that'll do, everyone. And I hope this made your astronomy day just a little bit better. And we will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.